Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowering Leaders podcast. At Aleda, we are passionate about inspiring connections and creating a world of collaboration. Our signature program, Aleda Connect, curates groups of 5 to 6 leaders from diverse backgrounds in sport, industry, social venture and the arts who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
It's been amazing. Here you are on this Zoom call, feeling within the first session like you intimately know these people and care for them. And then all of a sudden realising that even though you're in totally different industries, we're all going through the same thing, or we've been through it and we can help each other, or there's just this hurdle that you can't see past, and then you share it with the group and there's 5 answers in 40 minutes and you think, I have not slept for 2 weeks thinking about that. Like, how is this possible?
So you're listening to stories and the breadcrumbs of what makes success, and I constantly get something out of these Zoom calls and catch-ups because we're all living the same stuff, aren't we?
Extraordinary people with extraordinary experience. What happens there is magical.
The Empowering Leaders podcast is proudly brought to you by Victoria University, where cutting-edge sports and exercise science facilities like heat chambers, performance labs, and altitude environments mean VU is ranked 7th in the world for sports science. VU, uniquely you. As always, a big thank you to Jason Nicholas and his team at Temper Bedding, a mattress like no other. If you enjoy listening to the Empowering Leaders podcast, be sure to subscribe, and please, if you have a moment, we would love you to leave a review so we can reach more listeners and empower more leaders. In every great team and organisation, there are unseen leaders who shape the mindset, culture and standards that drive sustained success. Today's guest is one of those rare individuals. Gilbert Enoka has spent more than 2 decades as the mental skills coach and culture architect for the New Zealand All Blacks, one of the most respected and successful sporting teams in history. Across more than 300 test matches, including back-to-back Rugby World Cup victories in 2011-2015, Gilbert helped transform the All Blacks from a team under pressure to a culture built on humility, trust and world-class performance. He's the mind behind many of the team's most enduring philosophies and a master of building environments where people can perform under pressure, stay true to their values and put we before me. From a childhood spent in an orphanage to becoming one of the most respected thinkers in performance psychology and leadership, Gilbert's journey is a masterclass in resilience, identity and the power of connection. He now brings those lessons beyond sport, sharing his life's work in a brilliant new book, Unstoppable, described by Steve Hansen, former All Blacks head coach, as a blueprint for anyone who wants to understand what makes the All Blacks culture so powerful and how to build that in their own life. Gilbert, welcome to the Empowering Leaders.
Thank you, Luke. Lovely to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Congratulations on an incredible life story, and you spent 2 decades shaping the mindset as one of the most successful teams in sporting history that we all admire. Can you tell us what drew you to that space first and foremost, the mental skills performance psychology world?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I sort of fell into it, Luke. I started playing sport myself, actually started in rugby like most New Zealanders, and then ventured into the sport of volleyball and wanted to get better. Our team started getting better, and then I wanted to get better at getting better. And as one of the leaders in the group, I found that the biggest obstacle to people performing consistently was in their mind. It was, they couldn't concentrate, they couldn't recover from mistakes. They had lots of self-doubt, and so I started to identify that what I called the final frontier. And that was the mind, and no one had really investigated that. And so I traversed into that space and began looking at ways that could help improve performance.
It's an amazing story from growing up in an orphanage, Gilbert, to then being at the forefront of one of the leading high-performing teams in the world. Can you tell us about some of that adversity in your youth and how that shaped you and the resilience that you build into the organisations you work with?
Yeah, look, it was, I had no choice over where I was born. I had no choice over how I was nurtured. They were decisions taken out of my hands. And I was placed into an environment, into a facility we were well cared for, actually. We just lacked the that sense of love and connection and belonging that you get when you come from what we consider to be a normal family. And so I spent 12 years inside that institution. I learned two very important skills. One is I learned how to work and I learned how to fight. And those two things served me very, very well as I went through. And, the orphanage, I had many lessons, also had lots of scars. I had moments that tested me, moments that shaped me. And I guess on reflection, forged insights that I can tap into now and that I did in the work that I actually did.
Gilbert, do you look back, and you would obviously have been in that facility, as you said, not your choice, with dozens, hundreds of other young kids. You've gone on a path of great success and happiness. Was that something that happened a lot out of the orphanages, or was the demographic struggling in life after that experience?
I think more the latter, Luke. My own family, because there were 6 of us, all boys, we ventured through the orphanage and have moved into quite a normal life post it in terms of outcome, in terms of all got successful jobs, all in solid, healthy relationships, but huge scars. I've never to this day had a reunion of anyone in the orphanage. You hear snippets of things that happened. I know a lot of people struggled and have had struggles post it. We were doing inside that institution was trying to survive. And when you do that, then the memories you have from those experiences are more challenging and hard and difficult, and some that you don't really want to recollect. So you tend to tuck away in a box and leave them stored. And for that reason, we haven't had a lot of catch-ups. And I meet people from time to time online who connect, but nothing formal. We've just sort of moved into a different space where, we wanted to create a new life and a new way of being for everybody.
Gilbert, randomly, yesterday I was actually reading some of the history of the Romanian orphanages in the late 80s and 90s, and I'm not sure if you're aware of the studies on that. The Romanian dictator Ceausescu was overthrown, and they found hundreds and hundreds of orphanages and found a lot of the kids that had been well fed, kept warm, and you probably know this story better than I do, but just the no love or the no affection and the no speaking, and they literally, babies were dying of loneliness and lack of connection. It's a horrific story. Is that sort of the thing that you just can't replicate in a home life when you grow up with that? Is that part of it?
This is inside the orphanage you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think we called the people inside the orphanage uncles and aunties, and with all best intentions, that's what they aim to be. But nothing can replace, that umbilical connection you get with someone who's your mother or your father. And the interesting thing, we lived in a time where society wasn't inclusive of accepting those sort of people too. So we were considered outsiders. We were considered abnormal. We were the home kids. And so the way in which other people looked at you dumped more hurt, I guess. It's the emptiness that comes from not being connected to something that really fills your heart and fills your soul. It's hard to describe, but and there's a piece of it, I think, that still lives inside probably everybody who was inside that orphanage.
I appreciate you sharing that story. You then go on to teach the highest of high-performing athletes what it's like to perform under pressure. What did you learn about that, dealing under extreme pressure and being able to have success?
Well, what we understand, everyone faces high-pressure moments. I faced them every day when I was in that orphanage, and they came in lots of different guises, I guess. And so everything was a pressure cooker. And it's only in hindsight that you sit back and you look back and reflect. And, I learned some valuable lessons. Like I learned that, you'll never rise above the opinion you have of yourself. That's something you control. Life gives you what it gives you, and you get what you get. But your environment doesn't determine your value, your mindset does. And so when you understand that you can take control over that, you get some degree of control over your mindset. So you can weaponize it. And so I've learnt, and that's an important lesson. I've learnt that it's your choices, not your chances, that determine your destiny. So, every day you get choices over what you think and what you do, and you can make those choices to either stay stuck or stay living in something that you've moved beyond. But in the end, the choices you make are far more powerful than the conditions you face. And so when you take those learnings, those two simple learnings, and apply them into any environment, whether you're a coach, a business leader, a parent, or an elite athlete, there's tools that can help people lead inside all those roles. And, making good choices, you'll never rise above the opinion you have, and all those roles helps you to be able to take control rather than be controlled.
What a freeing thing that is, to arrive at that within yourself, isn't it? That your choices are going to outweigh the hand you dealt. And I loved the mindset that you spoke about. I've heard you write and speak about 3 pillars of leadership: knowing who you are, being who you are, and staying who you are. And in your view, what does great leadership look like when you've seen it done well?
Look, I've seen both sides of the coin. I've seen great leadership and I've seen shite leadership, to be fair. But great leadership to me is personal, not positional. Great leaders lead from who they are, not where they sit. And once people understand that living the standards that they espouse become really, really important beacons for those that they lead. Not just to see it, not just to talk it, but to live it. Nail it, not nearly it. There's a lot of leaders out there that just nearly it, but they never nail it. And their presence under pressure doesn't give the people that they lead really, really positive vibes. I know that when the leader improves, everyone improves. So as long as you're working on yourself, then you're looking to improve yourself, then you'll by default improve others. And to really understand that what we're trying to do is to understand that pressure isn't the enemy. And a lot of people in this day and age try to by default try and portray it like that. But I've learned through my own life that pressure's not the enemy, it's the arena. It's the arena that we live in. So it's a lifestyle. So I'm not trying to rise above it. I'm actually trying to get inside that bubble. And once I know I'm inside that bubble, I get comfortable with the discomfort, because all pressure moments have come with discomfort. And then I back myself to adopt the skills to navigate my way in and around the obstacles inside that bubble. And the great leaders really have a presence that set the tone inside that bubble and help the people they lead navigate their way through the many obstacles that confront them.
You write about that brilliantly in your book, which is a great achievement, and you've got such clarity on that trying to turn pressure into a power, I think, is the way you describe it. And that was very interesting to not the absence of it, but feeling like pressure's the arena and leaning into it is something we all face, whether we like it or not. They're the cards, aren't they? Everyone feels some sort of pressure, and your reflection is it's the ability to turn that into something that you can deal with. Is that a good summation?
Oh, lovely summation, Luke. Like, who would want to live their life without pressure? Would you like to have a year where you didn't experience any pressure? Hell no. I'd hate it. So a life without pressure is just, I can't fathom it. And so once we adopt the mindset like that, and then we invite those moments in where we're tested and that insights can be forged, then it becomes a totally different kettle of fish.
Gil, you work with some of the world's best athletes and coaches. What separates those that get that sustained excellence from those who just don't quite get there in your mind?
What separates it is, I think, the willingness. It's not complex, actually, I reckon. It's the willingness to work. A lot of people feel that they can achieve the things that they can achieve without work, that there's silver bullets, there's magic solutions. There's not. I encourage people to dream big and real big, but understand that with every dream you're given a pair of overalls and that you've got to work for it. And I kind of love that. I love that AI can give you stuff and Google can give you information, but none of it will actually really take you to where you got to do unless you roll your sleeves up and you do the work. And so I think, the whole notion of that's important. The notion of character you talked about before, that if you don't know yourself and you don't be yourself and you don't stay yourself, then you won't sustain yourself in the long term. You won't win the race. You might win certain stretches, but you won't work in the long haul. And then those who are really, really great have understood that you can only win when your mind is stronger than your emotions. And you can't stop your emotions, nor do we want to. But once we understand that your mindset is a skill set and there are things we can use to help you navigate, then all of a sudden you weaponize it and it becomes hugely, hugely powerful for you. So with character and with mindset and that understanding, that's how you become unstoppable.
The All Blacks often spoke about leaving the jersey in a better place. How do you think about that, maybe beyond sport to leadership, to family and to community? And what does that mean, that idea?
Well, I've always felt that the great teams and the great leaders always buy into something bigger than themselves. You know, like in the All Blacks, we had a simple philosophy. My role, and I had 23 years with that most wonderful team, was to pay respect and honour the jersey. And we used the phrase which we called ETJ, which is short for enhance the jersey. And so my role within the All Blacks, I was a mental performance coach and worked on the leadership, the culture in those areas, was to ensure that when I did my role, that I left that jersey in a better place than it was when I started. So my work was an example to those that have gone before us, and getting approval and nods from the earlier guardians is important. And then we set the example ourselves of what needs to happen now to protect the jersey. And one of the things I love about the All Black jersey is that, we still don't have our names on the back of it. And we don't have our names on the back of it because no one owns it. All you do is you're a caretaker, you're a custodian, and you're a guardian for the time that you get to fill it. And so what's required every week that a person plays for the All Blacks is to get into that changing shed. There's no pictures. There's no big emotional quotes around there. There's just your jersey on a hook. And you put that jersey on and you fill it and you go out and you pay respect to those people that have gone before and those that will follow. And so enhancing the jersey, ETJ, is right at the centre of what my responsibility was and the men that wear it, their responsibility is.
Yeah, the hair stands up on the back of the neck when you articulate it that way. And look, for those that maybe don't know the All Blacks legacy, it's an extraordinary one, and it is revered around the world. For a tiny little island like New Zealand, population as small as it is, it defies logic really that you could sustain that performance. But it's can you take us inside? It feels like the temperature and the happiness of New Zealand depends on the ongoing success of the All Blacks. It's something we all revere from outside, but tell us how much it actually means.
Oh, look, it's everything for a New Zealander. especially a male New Zealander and now a female New Zealander with the success of our Black Ferns, who are doing wonderfully well. You know, it has a history and a legacy. I've always said the legacy is far more intimidating than any opponent. You know, you can go out there and play games, but it's when you look the legacy in the eye that it becomes intimidating, and living up to those expectations. And they, you know, we've always said there's two ways of doing things in the All Blacks. One is the right way, and two is again. And when you belong and live in a legacy that has that placed upon you, it sets a standard that's way beyond anything else. And I love the fact that we're a small nation at the bottom of the earth, and that our success on the world stage makes us feel like a big brother, a big person, and that's important for identity as well. And so the success of our team allows us to, you know, punch above our weight, given identity across the world. You know, the All Blacks are the most successful international sporting team of all time, and that means a lot. And with that responsibility comes a wonderful privilege for those that get to wear the jersey or be associated with a team like I am.
I love what you said then for a moment, that, you know, you step into the All Blacks team as a 20-year-old, live the dream, but the massive overhang of the legacy of what's expected and the success that's expected. As a mental skills coach, that's almost a harder burden to carry than playing, you know, the Wallabies or the South Africans. Is that how you saw it?
Well, interesting. In the early days, yes. You know, like the public's expectations paled insignificant compared to our own. Our own were hugely, hugely high in terms of what we actually wanted to expect of ourselves in those particular moments. And so when it came to performing, it came to those expectations, there was none bigger than the ones that we had of ourselves. And that's the piece that keeps us going. And we learned about pressure. You know, over the 23 years when I first started, we wanted to avoid it. People said, "Jeepers, let's plan and let's prepare so well that we don't have to face any pressure." Wow, how naive were we? You know, we lost 2007 Rugby World Cup against France in the quarterfinal because we wanted to avoid pressure. And so we looked at ourselves fair and square in the eyes after that and worked out. And actually I was a big part of the problem because that was my area. You know, the thought of the time was, let's avoid it. Let's stay away from the main centres of town and get away from all the hype. But then once we learned that pressure was something to be excited about, you know, that we want pressure, because if you're playing a team and you experience pressure, then you get to a moment where something special was going to happen. And so in the end, we would start to lean into those moments and say, wow, we want to take these people to this place. Once we get to this place, we want to suffocate them. We want to squeeze them so that we take out every last piece of breath. And then when we've done the job, we can then go into and traverse back to the light. So it became something we loved and embraced, and it became a happy place for us. And all we had to do was just develop the skill sets to be able to control our attention in those moments where it could get diverted or we could get reckless and our energy and effort could be all over the place. But we love pressure. That's where we want to take them, and that's where great things happen.
We all are born different. As we grow, the experiences we have develop into outlooks uniquely our own, charting our life's course. No one sees an idea, opinion, or opportunity like you. And no one sees you like VU. Victoria University. Uniquely you.
At Aleda, our signature program, Aleda Connect, is something we're really passionate and proud of. We bring together groups of 5 to 6 people around the globe from diverse backgrounds, sport, industry, social venture and the arts. We come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
The thing that I've loved about it is not just the meetings that we have with our group, it's the thinking that you do for days and days afterwards. Someone says something and it sparks a thought, and I found that I would go back and look at things that I was doing in a different light. Within my sport and within women's sport, I'm just someone who I try to lead by keeping people talking about the issues. There's times when I think the person I'm trying to convince is not listening to me. It actually got me thinking about, okay, this is how I need to address my communication with them. So it was so valuable, and the little group that we've got is great, and I'm really looking forward to sort of continuing to connect with them into the future because we're all so very different. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it.
23 years inside that famous All Blacks environment. What's the lesson that you could share about what drives people to achieve that level of success and ultimately happiness? How do you derive happiness at the end of that?
I think it's a good question because you soon learn inside that environment that it's not about outcome. It's about the journey you have with the men and the women on our management, and the battles that you forge together. And like I spent most of my time in that environment in the early days, and the most prominent emotion I felt was relief. And it was the boys actually too, because you'd go out, the public expectations are so high, you'd perform, you'd win, and you go, oh, thank God for that. You get back in the shed and you're saying, wow, first priority, the media won't get on your back. And so it was predominantly relief. Now, as we've gone further, we've learned that you can't crush the joy. And I think in life and in sport, too often we rush past joy and we miss feeling its warmth. And so, we've begun to pause and stay inside those moments where we experience joy, and we don't crush it. We actually get people to vent about their joy, not just about their problems. When's the last time you've sat with somebody, and normally when you come together, all they do is start sharing about their problems. Well, we put a window in and say, first 2 minutes, we need you to vent about your joy. What are you happy about and what are you joyful for? And so in the end, the definition of success, what made me most satisfied is relationships. Other people matter, and it's what you do alongside the men and women inside your waka on behalf of your country that you share and experience and shape that makes it really, really successful. And my greatest moments of happiness, I've always had people around me, and they're never on my own. They're always shared experiences with both family and friends. And the longer I've done this, the more it's the dispersing of that to others that has given me the greatest joy.
It's a brilliant summation of it, isn't it? For you're not looking back and saying the World Cup victories and being in the sheds after those moments. It's the connection and the people and the joy of sharing that and passing that on. I was lucky enough to be in London and interview Steve Kerr, who's a legend of US basketball and just won everything. As a player, he won 5 championships. He's coached 4. He's coached gold medal teams, but he went to exactly the same place. What does success and happiness mean? It's the relationships and the connections and the lasting, the trophies, and that fade was, I think, to paraphrase Steve, but he was, again, the joy of the day of doing what you love to do with the people that you love being around. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It does, and I think ego normally pervades the environment in the early days when you're younger, but once you understand that what matters is the joy you bring on other people's faces, and that soon passes, and the responsibility you have to use the talents that you've been blessed with to enhance the game and enhance the relationships that you have the privilege of nurturing, and being the example. Like my daughter was asked at the book launch about what's one thing she learnt from me over my years of watching me in my role, and she said it was great seeing someone so passionate about doing something they're so passionate about. And it was a lovely response. And that's it. Like I love sport. it's my happy place, and I love everything's been associated with it. So it gets my all. And for her to be able to sit back and make that observation was just a special moment.
Also fortunate enough at the same conference in London, and standing next to Emma Hayes, she got off the train in London and she's holding a copy of Gilbert Enoka's book, Unstoppable. And her first thing was not hello, but you need to read this book, and sharing it with everyone in her vicinity. That must fill you with pride that your legacy is continuing on. She's the most successful female coach, I think, in women's sport. A lot of people are deriving a lot of sustained success out of your wisdom. Must fill you with pride.
Look, it does, Luke, and you know, when I wrote the book, and you know, the publisher sort of said, you want to do a bit of a lap and go around and you know, get people to do it. And I said, no. I said, if the book's good enough, it'll do its own work. And I had the wonderful opportunity of working with Emma when I was working with Chelsea. And, you know, the book's structured in a way where, you know, we have this section called Te Puna o Te Ki, which is it's sources of wisdom. And in Māori and Pacific Island nations, we have lots of places where people get wisdom from: mountains, rivers, lakes, and sport offers the same. So at the end of each chapter, I have a wellspring of wisdom or a source of wisdom where I share a story which has a wonderful wisdom that anybody can pick up and move with, and then, you know, and in that way, you know, it's a part of the book that's not just to be read, it's to be felt. And that's what I love about the fact that people they feel things in this book. And, you know, the widow, which is a challenge that I pose at the end of each chapter, it's not an exam to pass, but it's a doorway to walk through. And I'm encouraging people to read through the book, let it land, and then go back and have a look at the widows. And something, if one of them stirs something in you, then it's got your name on it. So just work on that. And by that means, it's a book, I think, that you'll never finish because you'll keep coming back to and revisiting. But it does warm my heart to write something that's me, and it's what I think takes to create, you know, to be unstoppable. And it's a quality all of us have, and I just hope everyone that picks it up learns something that helps them in whatever they're doing.
What a great legacy. Congratulations again on
Thank you.
On the work you've done. We love this idea that success leaves clues and the patterns of why people have these consistently successful lives, starting with this idea that you can't support other people unless you fill your own cup up. What do you do, Gilbert, to make sure you're at your best for others?
It took me a while to answer that, Luke, actually, because my upbringing forced me to always want to give, you know, because, and I can remember back in the early days when I first left the orphanage and started playing sport, and I started playing volleyball, and somebody said to me, Gilbert, you're good at this. It took me by surprise. I said, what? And when this person said something to me, it made me feel good. And so what did I want to do? I wanted to experience that feeling again. So what did I do? I went and worked a bit harder so I could hear somebody else say that same thing to me. So I learnt very early on the power of an act of kindness, and what that does to nourish me. You know, and so going through my upbringing, I probably pursued that with, you know, a selfish vigor because the well was empty in terms of that being filled. But as I've gone through my life, I've become pretty clear on what sustains me. In the book, I talk about everyone adopting a holy hour, the holy hour where I visit, what am I going to do to strengthen my character today? Just something little. Where can my mindset be tested? So how do I need I just want to be forewarned about this. And then what am I going to do for my body? And for my body, I do Bikram yoga, which is in the hot stuff, 38 degrees Celsius. Same exercises every day, but I'm different. I don't do it every day, twice a week. And then I go to the gym. And that's just, I gym gently these days. The body's aged, so I've got to look after it. I get a massage every week. So I've got a massage therapist. She's a wonderful lady, so I enjoy that. And on tour, when the heat's really on, I'd spend the night. George Duncan, who was the muscle therapist, would either be in my room or his room. We'd had 2 glasses of wine. We'd close the door, and we would vent. No one was safe. Not any person or anything. And we would just vent, let it out. Then when we finished and closed the door, it was all gone. And then we woke up and did it again the next day. So, and that worked for me.
I love it. I love how clear a picture you have. And as you said, it took you a while to work it out, but understandably with the background. But I love that pattern, knowing what works for you. What's one thing that has worked for you as a leader that you'd never change?
Oh, look, my mantra for me really is my word is my honour. I'll honour my word and I'll seal things with a handshake. Like if I made a commitment to you and I said, righto, Luke, this is what you're going to get from me, and I shook your hand, I don't need it signed 20 times and witnessed by every man and woman this side of the black stump. I knowing who I am, being who I am, and staying, that's really important to me. So that set of values that guide the way I live my life is important to me. And, it's sort of, as a leader, I've always sort of said, show me, don't tell me. And when you're in environments like the All Blacks, like the leaders used to say to me, Bert, they call me Bert, they'd say, Bert, the boys see everything. So you've got 40 players and you've got 20-odd management. They see everything. And I think it's the same in any workplace, in any team. You think if you take a shortcut that it's not seen, they're all seen. And the inconsistencies in those areas will come back to bite you on the bum. And so staying true to who I am and revisiting that from time to time has always been something I've valued and something I really, live by.
Coming out of your unique upbringing, was there like a visionary leader who inspired you and you felt like that was a stepping stone that helped you along the way?
Yeah, I think, look, I had a lot of luck, I reckon. Whilst I had a lot of challenges, like I remember when I was in the orphanage, I had a school teacher who'd just come up and say, Gilbert, come here. He'd take me down the shop and he'd just buy me an ice cream and never say anything to me. He'd just basically buy me an ice cream. We'd go back into the classroom and sit down and carry on, and he just understood. Only the people who care about you can hear you when you're quiet, and he cared. And I think that was a really, really strong notion. I think Wayne Smith, the rugby coach, and Lee Gibbs, the netball coach here in New Zealand, they backed me when the world wasn't ready for my space. They believed in what I did before people understood it, and they went into bat for me. They saw something in me, and they stood by me and fought for me. And, Wayne had to sort of disguise me as a masseur just to get me into the team, But he believed in it with all his heart, and so did Lee Gibbs in the netball. So he's a male in a female area at a time when no one was accepting of that either. And so those people were just magnificent, and they were leaders, I think, way ahead of their time, to be fair. And then you get your sort of like my wife, and who's a leader in a different sense, never seeks the limelight, the steady hand behind everything, the partner in truth, who tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And that's been a constant and a steady influence that is very, very underrated, I think. And I think you'll find most great leaders who are still with their partners of a good time will normally look back and have a similar assessment of their contribution. They really are the the heroes behind what the people see, I think.
Yeah, well said. And I concur with you wholeheartedly. We see leaders who have sustained success are often inherently curious. How does curiosity show up for you?
Everywhere. The great thing about the environments I've been in is that you get created with obstacles when you don't probably want them or need them. Like sport just compresses everything, and Graham Henry, Wayne Smith, Steve Hansen, they always used to come into my room and they quite often say, "Now, Bert, where you going with this?" And I quite often say, "I don't know, but I know I'm heading in the right direction." And you had to find a way, because there's no other thing that was possible than finding a way. And what I learned is that you can't do it on your own. So I've never met a leader who's achieved their potential and their capabilities all on their own. They've got satellites of people and places that they go to get nourished ideas. Back in Wayne Smith's day with the All Blacks, he insisted that we spend 10% of our budget on innovation and 10% of our time on innovation. And so at the end of the year, our budgets were scrutinised with that accountability. And what it did is it kept us surging ahead and finding the next horizon for our own disciplines and our own spaces. So curiosity came from a structure within the way in which the coach led, and curiosity came from obstacles, which meant unless you found a way, you wouldn't get the success that the legacy demanded.
Don't get to have 23 years in an organisation without really being able to connect with the people in it and have that impact, as you said, carving a new path where it wasn't acceptable to have a mental skills coach or a sports psych was just not even possible. How did you find your communication? Did you have a mantra when it came to the way you communicated to get your unique message across?
I think it's credibility. So I had to earn my stripes. So I in the early days, I chose very wisely. I love the phrase which says, "Sometimes your impatience to win is the reason you lose." So, on the sports field, if you're defending, especially in a game of rugby, and you're in a line and then someone gets impatient and goes out of line and gives a penalty away, quite often we lose a game. And fast forward and apply that to my own area. When Wayne Smith took me on, if I was impatient and I tried to push too fast and said, "Come on, you've got to take me, this area is too important," they would have said, "On your bike, boy," and you were gone. And so, I just had to pick the player, pick the moment, pick the message, then make my incision. And that became, and then once I had success with an individual, they then told somebody else, and then you had more people not sidling up to you and doing it. And then if you fast forward that now, and I can go into an environment and I get credibility because of the successes that I've had with the teams and people I've worked with. But one thing remains constant is that you can only get external movement in somebody by creating internal movement. So, Luke, if I want you to adopt a strategy of preparation that's different to what you've done, unless I move you internally, something inside your head, then you'll never adopt it. And too many people just put things in front of people and bludgeon them into accepting it. So I think, the timing of what, when, and how, the understanding of you've got to get internal movement before you get external movement, and you put those two things together. Like I spent most of my time, and I still do, to be fair, even now when I'm working with the England cricketers and other people, I'm still saying to myself now, how am I going to get them to look at this through the lens that I think they need to help their performance? I'll spend hours on that, days sometimes for a 2 or 3 minute intervention or discussion with an individual or a group. And the power is getting that piece right.
So when you say move internally, you mean finding an emotional connection that makes people want to change? Is that what you're angling for, or?
Well, it's an understanding as well. Like, let's say, vulnerability is a big word that's tossed around the sporting environment these days. Back in the day, if you sort of said that you had fears or you had self-doubt, then you were punched in the head or you were sent out to pasture, Nowadays, we understand that vulnerable is the new strong. So I'm trying to get an athlete to improve in some areas, and the door's mental. I said the obstacle, the obstruction is what's happening mental. So it's a mental thing. So I've got to find a way for them to see that. And so I might say to you, Luke, you're struggling in your performance. And I might say, look, we can't train, Luke, what you won't talk about. So I need you to talk about what it is that you struggle with. And once we identify that, we can then train to improve it. All of a sudden you have an understanding, you have a shift cognitively, and you might say, yeah, that's true. And so I'd say, well, tell me a bit more about it. And then all of a sudden you start sharing. So I've shifted you from an understanding point of view. Emotional is different. People always thought people in my area were motivators. Oh, here he comes. Here's the motivator, and which is furthest from the truth. That's the coach's job. They're the ones that do that. Our job is to provide skill sets and tools for individuals to navigate the obstacles that exist. So, and sometimes I can put a video or an image up and it does shift someone internally, and then they look at something a little bit differently. But there's not one size fits all. I've learned in my area, it's one size fits one. And once you take that into your work with the people that you're trying to get better, you're not trying to clone excellence, you're trying to customize it, then you begin to move them in a way that stabilizes their performance and helps them to enjoy it more as well.
It's remarkable when you think about the physical differences in the end in elite anything become very, very minuscule, and all the gains really are in your world, and we understand it more, but I still think it's so underinvested in when you think about the benefits that come from exactly the way you described it there so well. Gilbert, who's been the greatest leader in your life?
Oh, look, one more thing just on that last point, if that's okay, Luke, because I think it's important. I think the world and the public demands perfect performance. What they're looking for is the ultimate performance. But I think in what I've learned in my area, what we're striving for is perfect process. So irrespective of what happens, you make a mistake, you have a loss, you don't get selected, you miss out on a job promotion, you have difficulties in the family, there's challenges with your children. If you have a structure and you have a process that is reliable, it gets you through anything. So you're not looking at the perfect relationship or the perfect performance. So I think that's really important.
So that's the unstoppable part for you, is saying if your process in life is something that serves you well, that the hand grenades in life are going to come, but you can always fall back on understanding yourself, and you can deal with those things in ways that others can't without understanding the process. Is that a big part of your work?
Pretty well. I think I always say to people, you hear people talk about mindset, skill set, and structure, and you put them on a triangle. And what I've learned that in my work, they're all important, by the way, don't get me wrong. You need them all aligned. That's how you power your performance. But one of them is a superpower if you really understand it. And so I quite often ask people, which one do you think is a superpower? And I say, who thinks skill set is? No hand goes up. Not one hand goes up in the audience, which I agree with, by the way. You ask mindset, everybody puts their hand up and they think, yep, unless I get my mindset right, and then I go on to say, well, it's not the superpower for me. The superpower is structure, because, it's when things unravel It's when you don't have the systems and structures in place to meet the competing demands of the moment. It's like that game of Jenga where you pull the pieces of wood out. And so the athletes have prehab and rehab and media alignments and all those. Unless you've got a framework that guides your actions and thoughts in a specific situation, you will always be vulnerable to a breakdown. And that's why when you ask me the question about that's what I mean by perfect process, is having a structure you go to, no matter how difficult, challenging or devastating a particular moment in time is. If you have a reliable structure where you can direct your attention to over how you want to think and what you want to do, then you'll find a way through. And and you think of all your tough things in life, structure and discipline will have been right at the front of it. So that's why I say perfect process. That's what I'm after, more than perfect performance.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Back to the second final question I wanted to ask you is, who's been the greatest leader in your life?
Oh, the greatest leader, I guess the person who's been most valuable to me probably is my wife, I think. Everyone else has come into different domains, but she's been the one that's guided me through and been there to lean on, been there to smack me around the ears when I'm feeling sorry for myself. And above her was probably her mother. And you'll see in the book, what other person would write a book about becoming unstoppable and have both their mother-in-law and Richie McCaw in the same paragraph? And you need to read that piece because she was simply, the most remarkable woman I've ever met, because she was patient and she allowed me time to grow into myself and just the wisdom. And her daughter's become exactly like her. And so, boy, how blessed am I to have had both of them in my life.
Not many, as you said, are referencing their mother-in-law as a great legacy, and what a gift it is, as you said, and you get it twice over with beautiful wife. You've had the ability to collaborate with the All Blacks and high performance leaders around the world. We're a bit obsessed with this idea of collaboration, Gilbert, that we're better when we connect in different ways. Has there been someone from any area of your passion you thought, God, I'd love to collaborate with a particular person?
I try and collaborate with everyone. There's not a person I meet that inside my head, I don't ask a question. What do I want to learn from this person? What's a question I want to have? I meet with a lot of different people and all they do is talk and you don't get a word in. And they're hard work. I try and move out of those situations very, very quickly. But I'd like to collaborate. One thing I haven't learnt, and I'd like to be more reliable on, is to how do you know when a team is ready? And I've been inside some of the world's most successful teams. I can quite often, sometimes I can get it right, but a lot of times I can't. I'd love to know, to collaborate with anyone who can help answer that question in a way that gives us greater understanding, to that, because that's the age-old question, isn't it? You do the work. I'm sitting in the State of Origin with Craig Bellamy, and we're sitting there, and he turns to me and he says, "Where do you think we're at, Bert?" And I said, "I've got no idea." And I said, "What about you, mate?" And he says, "The same, And these are two guys that have had a bit of experience. We had a fear inkling, but it still gives us an idea of, an area that you can always learn from, grow from. That's something that I'd love to collaborate with.
Yeah, what a great note to finish on and send that challenge out. It's a unique thing in sport, isn't it, Gilbert, that been in a locker room myself where you felt like this is it, you're on and you're going to win for sure, and you come out and you're 10 goals down at quarter time. And great question to answer. unstoppable. Go and check out Gilbert's book. It's a great legacy. I learned a lot from our conversation today, so I really appreciate you joining me, and congratulations on the book and everything else.
Thank you, Luke, and thanks for the questioning and the ease of conversation, which is always nourishing, and I enjoyed it very much. Thanks very much.